The NFL Scouting Combine has officially ended, so today, let's talk about the biggest winners and losers of the 2024 Scouting Combine. So the way we're going to be doing this is by going through each position, talking about a couple different winners and losers. Now, a couple things to note, there were a lot of people who did not participate, mainly guys like Caleb Williams, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. So we're just kind of working with what we got, but nonetheless, I thought there were some very impressive performances. And we are going to begin with the quarterback position. Now, this was the position that a lot of the top tier guys did not perform at, mainly the top three guys, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Drake May. I think that Jayden Daniels probably should have performed. I think had he performed, he probably could have brought himself up to be a lock as a second quarterback off the board. But with what we saw, I thought that Michael Penix Jr. and Devin Leary, surprisingly, all looked the best. Now, give credit to JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix for going out there and competing, but I think of the three quarterbacks of Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, and Bo Nix, I thought Michael Penix looked by far the best, and then I think JJ McCarthy looked the second best of the three, but I thought Bo Nix was probably the biggest loser of the three. Now again, Bo Nix did not perform particularly bad by any means, but I think compared to what Michael Penix was able to do, and even what JJ McCarthy was able to show, he didn't look the best. Again, give credit to guys like Devin Leary and Kedon Slovis. Slovis went out there and actually ran the 40, and actually ran a pretty damn good 40 given his size. So with that performance, I could actually now see Kedon Slovis actually getting drafted. Also give credit to Joe Milton, who I also thought was a winner of the Combine. He was able to show off his arm strength. I think it was almost a guarantee for him to be a winner. So all in all, the biggest winner was Michael Penix, and in my opinion, the biggest loser was Bo Nix. Again, Bo Nix didn't have a bad Combine by no means, but of the three quarterbacks who are projected to potentially be first-round picks, I thought Bo Nix probably performed the worst. Now let's move on to the running back position, and there were a couple standouts that went out there today. I think Trey Benson had a fantastic draft Combine. He also ran a 4.39, and as someone who is projected to potentially be the second or third running back off the board, I do think he guaranteed himself a spot as at least the second, but potentially the first as well. Also give credit to guys like Jalen Wright, who ran a 4.38. Jalen Wright has a lot of potential, and people are saying that he is potentially the next Alvin Kamara. And with this performance, you got to see a lot of what was really good about him. Also shout out to guys like Isaac Urendo, who ran a 4.33. Give credit to guys like Keelan Robinson, who is looking for a spot as a special teams player, as well as Marshawn Lloyd, who also had a very good day. But in my opinion, the couple players who I thought did not have the best day were Dillon Johnson out of Washington and Kendall Milton out of Georgia. Dillon Johnson was always going to be somebody who didn't really perform that well in the draft combine, didn't really stand out by any means. On the day, he had a 4.68 40-yard dash with a 1.62 10-yard split. He only had a vertical jump of 31.5 inches and a broad jump of 9 feet 9 inches. And of the day, based off next gen stats, he was the 15th ranked running back of the draft combine. And when it comes to his athleticism, he was ranked the 29th in terms of the athletic score, which is another next gen stats breakdown. Now, Dillon Johnson again was never going to perform particularly well, but I did want to see a little bit more from him. Same thing kind of goes for Kendall Milton, who on the day didn't have a poor day, but running a 4.62 is a little bit disappointing. He ran a 4.62 with a 10-yard split of 1.51 seconds. He had a good vertical jump of 35.5 and a good broad jump of 10 feet and 4 inches. Again, the biggest disappointing factor for me was the 40-yard dash. I don't think he had the worst day in the world, but running a 4.62 is definitely going to hurt his stock. He was somebody who I thought could potentially get drafted late in the NFL draft, but right now I'm a little bit more skeptical. Now let's go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position, and to be honest with you, this was a phenomenal wide receiver showcase at the draft combine. I thought the top guys like Adonai Mitchell and Brian Thomas improved their draft stock tremendously. But of course, there were a couple players who didn't really perform that well in the draft combine. It's just not very many of them. Let's start off with the biggest winners of the day, and we can go down the entire list. Shout out to Xavier Worthy for breaking the record with a 4.21. He is now potentially being talked about as a potential first round pick. I still believe he will go in the second round, but for him to be a person to talk about in the first round is ridiculous. Brian Thomas Jr. had a fantastic draft combine, running a 4.33 and really showcasing his athleticism. He also had a vertical jump of 38.5 inches and a broad jump of 10 feet and 6 inches. He had himself a freaking day. Adonai Mitchell was somebody who I did not suspect would be this athletic, but he went out there and ran a 4.34 with a 39.5 vertical jump and an 11 feet 4 inch broad jump. If you had asked me what I thought his measures would be before the draft combine, I probably would have said about a 4.48, but he ran a full millisecond faster than my anticipation. Javonte Walker also had himself a very nice day with a 4.36 40-yard dash with a 40.5 vertical jump and 11 feet 2 inch broad jump. I don't think he performed the greatest at the Senior Bowl, but he definitely showcased a lot of his skills at the draft combine. Again, a ton of winners to go through here. Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Xavier Legette, even Troy Franklin had himself a nice day. Not a lot of really stuff stuff to nitpick here. The only player who I thought really needed a really nice day but didn't have the best day was Keon Coleman. And that's not to say he had a bad day per se. He did run a 4.61, but he was somebody who was really known to not be the most freakishly athletic, and I thought he did really well on basically every drill. The only thing about it is I do think he went from being, in my opinion, the 4th best wide receiver in the draft to now potentially being the 5th or 6th. So again, we're kind of nitpicky here, but with the way that guys like Adonai Mitchell and Brian Thomas and Xavier Worthy and even guys like Ladd McConkey and Roman Wilson performed, it definitely brought down a guy like Keon Coleman. Lastly, give a credit to Ricky Pearsall, who I thought had a perfect day. Ran a 4.41, did really good throughout the rest of the events. I thought he had a spectacular day. When I tell you this wide receiver class is maybe the best of all time, I'm not kidding. It is spectacular. Next up, we're gonna go through the tight end position really quick here. Not a lot of stuff really went poorly for the tight end position this time around. When it comes to the biggest winner, you got to go with Devin Culp, the Washington tight end. He was ranked the 1st when it comes to the athletic score. He didn't do all the combine events, but what he was able to do with the 4.47 40-yard dash was plenty for him. He's going to be more of that speedy tight end that you're going to look for as more of a vertical threat. But outside of that, I thought Jaheim Bell had himself a decent day as well. Running a 4.61 with a 35-inch vertical jump, that is always going to help your draft stock. But of course, we have to give at least one loser, and I'm going to give it to Brevin Spanford from Minnesota. Somebody who wasn't really on my radar to be a top 10 or top 5 tight end, but at the draft combine, he basically locked himself up as not going to be a top 10 tight end on a lot of people's list. On the day, he ran a 4.77, which is just not that great. In comparison to guys like Ja'Tavion Sanders, that's a full millisecond difference. On the day, Brock Bowers did not run the 40-yard dash, which is super disappointing, but I'll give credit to guys like Ja'Tavion Sanders for running that 4.69. Brevin Spanford did not have a very good day in totality. Now, having a 31.5-inch vertical jump isn't the worst thing in the world, but when you're a tight end, you need to have some hops, and in total, his athleticism was really not on display. I think his draft stock has potentially fallen a little bit. Now, as of when I'm recording this video, I did not get to see the offensive linemen. Usually, the offensive linemen don't really showcase that much, but I will make a couple community posts about the offensive linemen, so if you're interested to see who I thought was the biggest winner and loser of the offensive line class, go ahead and check out my community post. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the defense, and we're just going to go through this a little bit faster so I don't take up too much of your time. I thought of the edge rushers, I thought that Jared Verse and Dallas Turner had some really good days. Jared Verse looked really smooth in all of the events he went through. He also ran a 4.58, which is a spectacular time for a guy that size. I think of all the edge rushers, the edge rusher that dropped the most in my board was Braylon Trice and Darius Robinson. I really wanted to see Darius Robinson go out there and run at least a 4.8, but running a 4.95 and not looking spectacular in the rest of the drills definitely did hurt his draft stock. He was the slowest edge rusher in the group. The reason why I say Braylon Trice dropped on my board was because of the fact that he ran a 4.72 with a 1.65 10-yard split and didn't really compete in a lot of the drills on the day, and I don't think that's really his fault, but when you're comparing him to guys like Laiatu Latu, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, and even Chop Robinson, and even Mo Kamara, then I do think his draft potentially fell. Of all the guys who really needed a good day, I thought that Braylon Trice was one of those guys, and he just did not have that good of a day. So my biggest winner on this day would have to go to Dallas Turner and Jared Verse. My biggest loser would have to be Darius Robinson and Braylon Trice. When it comes to the defensive tackle room, one of my biggest takeaways of the day was that Texas has some damn good defensive tackles, and on the day, Texas had a fantastic scouting combine. This is something I probably should have mentioned a bit earlier. Texas absolutely obliterated the draft combine. Every single Texas player had a good day. And in the defensive tackle room, they had two really special athletes in T'Vondre Sweat, who ran a 5.27 but is 366 pounds, which by the way is a very good size for him to get to. He ran a 5.27 with a 26-inch vertical jump. We all knew this guy wasn't going to test the waters, but the fact that he is ranked as highly as he is mainly due to his size, his physicality, and his ability to be athletic for his size. Byron Murphy also looked fantastic through all the events. He ran a 4.87 and looked extremely smooth the entire day. Speaking of smooth, the biggest winner was Braden Fisk. He had a stellar performance at the draft combine, as perfect as it could have been. It almost looked like he was a robot out there with how damn good he looked. Also give credit to guys like Chris Jenkins and Mekhi Wingo. Those guys definitely did help their draft stock. Unfortunately, nobody in front of them had their stock drop, but those guys had a fantastic day. Of all the players on the day, I thought that McKinley Jackson had the least impressive performance. He ran a 5.26 and in total looked really poor in a lot of the different events. There was one event where he had to go through it a handful of times because he just couldn't do it. And outside of him, I also thought that Justin, and I hope I say his last name right, Aboigbe from Alabama, also had a pretty poor day, kind of a similar day to McKinley Jackson. Didn't test well when it comes to the measurables, and when it came to the drills, did not perform all that well. Now we get to the linebacking group, and all the linebackers who I thought were going to be potentially first round or second round guys performed pretty damn well. I thought of the day, Peyton Wilson and Kalen DeLoach were the two players who, in my opinion, stood out the most. I did like what I saw from Adrian Cooper as well as Jordan McGee. However, on the day, I thought Peyton Wilson really stole the show. The biggest loser has got to be, and again, I'm horrible with names here, but this guy had a terrible day, Maima Njongmeta. Again, I hope I said that name right. He ran a 4.91 and had a 4.66 20-yard shuttle. He ranked 25th on the of all of the linebackers when it comes to their athleticism score, and he definitely hurt his draft stock. Running a 4.91 as a pure linebacker is always going to be interesting to see if he maybe switches positions. Next up, at the cornerback position, we got to give credit to Quinyon Mitchell, who in my opinion is now my cornerback one on the day. Now I know Nate Wiggins ran a 4.28, however he did suffer an injury and he only weighs 173 pounds. And with that 173 pounds, you would expect him to be even more athletic than a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, but Quinyon Mitchell weighs significantly more and is just as impressive in the athleticism scores. I think Quinyon Mitchell is the biggest winner of the day, running a 4.33 with a 38-inch vertical jump, as well as a 10'2" broad jump, as well as looking fantastic in the rest of the drills. I thought the biggest loser of the day was Kalen King out of Penn State. He did not look very good throughout a lot of the different events. He is ranked the 36th ranked cornerback when it comes to the athleticism test, running a 4.61 with a 37-inch vertical jump and a 10'2" broad jump. I don't think it was a horrible day per se, but a lot of the cornerbacks looked really impressive. I also want to give credit to guys like Cam Hart, who ran a 4.50, which was a very, very good time for him. And I also want to give credit to Daquan Hardy, who I thought had a really good day as well. Let's go ahead and lastly move on to the safety position. This was a position where I thought most players looked really solid. On the day, I thought Millard Bradford out of TCU looked the best, with Javon Bullard also looking really good. I have some complaints about Cameron Kinchens running a 4.65, but speed was never really his best attribute. He's just somebody who you can trust as a good coverage guy, so I'm not too worried about his performance, but I do think his scouting combine potentially dropped him below a couple of the top guys. Fortunately for him, not a lot of very good safety prospects in this draft. So in totality, we had a very good scouting combine. The wide receivers looked fantastic. The quarterbacks looked good. You guys tell me your biggest winners and losers in the comment section below. But I love you guys. Peace.